And typically today, most of the fires that occur in Montana are captured at the initial attack level. And he mentioned 98% of those fires are captured at less than 300 acres, that being the definition of a successful initial attack. And those smaller fires typically don't have a lot of impacts to the resources, to the infrastructure, to the public, to emergency services and landowners, etc. But of course, 2% of those fires do become large, and they become complex incidents that require management to contain those and deal with all the various things that are affected by those fires. And certainly landowners are affected, the public is affected, public health and safety is affected, the county and local officials are affected, and the list goes on. So today we're going to talk about that, and we have two people here that are going to be able to lead us through that discussion, and both have extensive experience in large wildfire management. So, Brent Colbert is currently the the undersheriff for Lewis and Clark County, and then John Thompson is the incident commander of the Northern Rockies Incident Management Team. Brent is a native of Helena and a U.S. Army veteran, having served in the Gulf War. He started his career with the Sheriff's Office in 1995. In 2003, he was sworn in as a Lewis and Clark County deputy and worked in Lincoln and Wolf Creek. In 2016, he was promoted to sergeant, and in 2017, he became captain, overseeing the patrol division. As undersheriff, Brent has been involved in several emergencies and large fires, both as a deputy commander and as a commander, and he has assisted in several evacuations. John is a native of Deer Lodge and a graduate forester of the University of Montana.
Go Grizzlies. Humboldt State right here.
Here we go. Cal, go Bears, come on. All right. He began his career in fire management in 1988 and has worked as a firefighter, engine foreman, assistant fire management officer, and field specialist. In 2003, he became the fire management officer for the Bureau of Land Management's Western Montana District stationed in Butte. John is currently the incident commander of the Northern Rockies Incident Management Team number 7, a team that he has worked with since 2003. Today, Brent and John will discuss their roles in large wildfire incident management. Please join me in welcoming Brent and John.
Well, thank you for that. I'm glad you guys came back. We were worried that we weren't going to have very many people here. Try not to walk. Okay, you're good. Good. All right. Go back on here. As I said, we either good or bad, we've became good at evacuations. So it's good that we're able to get it done, but bad that we have to do it all the time. And in the last few years, it seems like we've been doing it quite a bit. We ended up putting a system together. I know that for years before that, there was some confusion over evacuations. But I'll go through a quick PowerPoint, and if you have questions, we of course want to work as a team here and answer your questions, kind of interactive here. So, evacuations. Law enforcement responsibilities. We have the legal authority to restrict the movement of the general population under those MCA codes there from the state. We have the legal authority to evacuate the public from their homes. This is given to the fire warden through the county commissioners, also through the governor of the state of Montana. But locally, to put it into perspective, if something happened in Lewis and Clark County, the county commissioners would have that authority, but they gave that authority to the fire warden, who is Sheriff Leo Dutton. So that's how he is able to, they gave him that responsibility, which he takes. An arrest on an evacuation is really not an option unless we have a person who refuses to leave, who's not capable of making that decision, meaning they are incapable. Either they are have used an intoxicating substance and they're not capable of making that decision on their own, or if they're under 18, and that's where people, we've ran into trouble through that before, where you have a family dwelling and they say that we're not evacuating, we're staying. If they have kids that are under 18, somebody has to take those kids out of there. Not saying that you can't stay there or a person can't stay there, but if those kids are under 18, they do have to leave. If there's a criminal offense that occurs, such as guns being drawn or an assault of some sort that may have happened, and like I say, either endangering children. Those are things that we can't ignore and that we won't ignore, and that's where people would get arrested during an evacuation. If someone does not want to leave their home, we have them sign a form. I won't get too far in the weeds, but back when we first started doing a lot of these fires back in 2000, when we had the big one, the Bucksnort fire, and those, we had different forms, and we weren't really coordinated, I guess. You would have pre-evacuation forms and then evacuation forms, and what we found over the years is people got confused. So we quit doing all of the pre-evacuation. Not saying that we won't go around and talk to people in the neighborhoods that are being affected, but when we do an evacuation, we have one form, and that's the form that we're going to give you, and that's the time that we're telling you to evacuate. And after that, we won't be back. We won't come back. It won't be a pre-evacuation. That will be the evacuation, and we won't come back after that. What we do when we evacuate is we will have checkpoints, because once we have people who we've evacuated out of an area, that area becomes our responsibility to help secure and make sure all of your property and all of your stuff is secure, because you have some nefarious people who decide that they'll take advantage of this situation and take advantage of your property, and we're there to keep that from happening. We work with other emergency responders to establish ingress and egress routes. We work very closely with the fire chief, like Rocky back there, and when we don't decide when to evacuate. We ask the experts, the fire experts, the chiefs. They are the ones that decide, hey, we should probably evacuate this area because that's where the fire is going to go. Sheriff's office, we're just going to go off what they're the experts, and we're gonna make that happen when they tell us to make it happen. So we will work closely with all of those people to make sure things happen. And again, like that bottom one says, we are responsible for the security of the scene after it's evacuated. And that's why it is so hard. What we do here in Lewis and Clark County is once you're evacuated and you leave, which we want you to do, to keep yourself safe and your family safe, property isn't worth that. If you can get your stuff out of there ahead of time, that's great. But once you leave the area, we don't let you back in for a lot of different reasons. One is we want to make sure that all of the fire officials and that are able to get to where they need to be, and firefighters need to get to where they need to be to make sure that they can take care of the fire, maybe save a structure and that kind of thing. So we want to keep people out of their way. That is the most important thing, and then the safety of yourself, because nobody knows. Well, maybe some of you do know that when these fires come through, that if we can't stop them. They're just going to go, and it keeps you safe. This is the evacuation form that we use in Lewis and Clark County. If we're able to get out ahead of time, we like to have a 2-hour window to be able to get out there and evacuate an area. As you can see up there on the form that we have things and tips and property that you might want to grab if you are evacuating out of there, medications, family pictures, any of that kind of stuff that you can take with you in a short period of time. It's kind of listed at the top, and that's for the people we're evacuating. The bottom part of the form, we like to get the information of the people that we've already talked to, and this is especially for the people who decide that they're not going to evacuate and stay. We need to know who's in there, and we'd like to know that for for a lot of different reasons. One thing is we know who's still in there, and if a fire goes through there, we have a pretty good idea of who stayed and how we can get a hold of family members, that kind of thing. So that's the reason for the form. Once you get this form and you're evacuated, we're going to have checkpoints, and you'll go in and out of those checkpoints. And as the fire is prolonged, if it's possible and the fire guys are saying it's safe, we may do some escorts in there. So you can check on your house, maybe get something that you missed, some of your medication that you may have forgot, that kind of thing, if it's safe to do so. So that's the form in Lewis and Clark County that you'll see. I noticed that MSPOA, Montana Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, got together and tried to get this standardized across the state. It's not quite there yet, but it's close. They have similar forms to this, and some of them still do pre-evacuation. So we're getting close to having a standard across the whole state. What you might see in the evacuation procedures that we will do is when a deputy goes there and tells you it's time to leave, have you fill out the form, you're staying, you're going. We're gonna mark out in front of your house, either on your driveway or on the street right close to your house, whether you were evacuated or not. And we have symbols that we'll use. So you'll see us spray painting in big letters, big orange letters, fluorescent letters, so everybody knows that there's either somebody still here at this place or everybody's gone. Again, to go over to checkpoints, you'll have those, the roadblocks, and then we'll be able to put out some public information numbers. Not all of that is going to be set in place when something really starts off, because as you can imagine, everybody's running around crazy for the first, I don't know, Rocky, what, hour, 2 hours or so in that area. We're trying to get things set up. We're trying to get public information numbers so you'll have some information if you're evacuated. Those are kind of how it works for the evacuation points. If we're spray painting, we have an X. You'll see, for us, you'll see X's and O's. If you evacuated, you're going to see, and we know you're gone, you're going to see a big X in your driveway. It means nobody's there. That's for us and firefighters, basically. So we know a 0 or an O is going to say somebody, they didn't evacuate, somebody stayed. And then for us, if there's multiple dwellings off of the driveway, then we go 3 X's or more. Just something, because you'll see those. If you do get evacuated, that's what we're doing, and that's what you'll see. The ICS, I'm going to let him go into the ICS for everything else, but the sheriff's office sets up a mini ICS as this happens. We're going to go grab a fire chief and find him, and Sheriff Dutton has threatened to handcuff certain chiefs that won't stay next to him, so he knows what's going on. We want the fire chief, we want We want a mutual relationship there. We want to know what fire's doing. They want to know what we're doing, and it's hard to find them because they're very busy running around, and we want to make sure that we're right in their pocket. So we have our small ICS system just for the sheriff's office, and then we join a bigger ICS system as it goes on. So the sheriff's office will have a plans and an ops and a logistics, financial, and then of course the command. And we will work. Once a fire team gets put in place, we will work with them in their ICS system. And I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, well, first there's going to be a disclaimer. This presentation is from John Thompson's perspective. And I don't intend it to be a class in incident management. It's just how I approach it. And for our students section over here, I want you guys to know that this is exactly what it's like when you do a dissertation for a master's degree, because there's a bunch of people out here that have been planted in the audience to see if I really know anything about incident management. And so there's former incident commanders and safety officers and plans chiefs and things like that. So we'll see how I do here, and some agency administrators that I've actually worked for. So that it's kind of interesting. But so kind of tearing off what Brent said, I come in with an incident management team, and really our job is to provide a command structure to the incident, and a key part of that command structure is their command structure, and generally, in most situations where you have law enforcement involved and you have a large law enforcement present, you're going to be in what's called unified command, which means that I'm the incident commander of the wildland fire, and Sheriff Dutton or Brent are going to be the incident commander for the law enforcement operation that's going on. And what we've found through our experience is that's usually the most seamless way to make it work, is that's their expertise. Usually the incident itself is our expertise, and if we operate that way, then it seems to work out pretty well. And so a couple other things too is that every county in Montana operates just a little bit different. I mean, you were talking about trying to get a standardized form, and you go to some counties in Montana and they have a 3-part evacuation. It's ready, set, go. Some are set, go. So you have to figure that out. And then sometimes you're operating across multiple county lines as well. Your incident doesn't know boundaries. And so that also is another complexity. And so you'll have to figure out, if we're in this county, we operate this way. If we operate in this county, we operate another way. Another thing that we've learned through the years is that one of the great ways that they do evacuation notification is through reverse 911. And the challenge with reverse 911 is that you have to register generally, because most people don't have a phone hanging on their wall anymore. I still do. If you don't have a landline, it's hard for them to push a button for reverse 911. And the reverse 911 technology is pretty darn sophisticated and pretty neat, because they can draw a perimeter basically on a map and just evacuate where they need to evacuate. But we've also learned, much like how evacuation is different in counties, the system they use for reverse 911 is different in every county as well. And so it's one of those things that you have to understand as well, and we have to understand. And one of the parts of our incident command system that we use under this command function is our public information function. And so we put a lot of time and effort into getting good information out, and that's one of those pieces of information that's really critical for folks in a fire area is, hey, if there is a need for evacuation, the fastest way really is reverse 911. And so you need to know that. The other thing, because I know we have private landowners in here as well, is you may live in one county and your private land is in another county, and there may be the potential that your private land in another county is being impacted by a fire, it's probably not a bad idea to be signed up for the reverse 911 in that other county as well, so that you could potentially get a notification that there could be a fire impact in your property somewhere else where you may not necessarily reside. And I had a friend that experienced that in, I think it was 2015 or something like that. They had a cabin that was being impacted, and he had signed up for the reverse 911 so that they would know if there was any potential impacts to their cabin and if they should get up there and take care of things. So when Gary called me in, I think it was December, he called me and asked me to do this. I'd had the chance to work with Gary last summer, and he was working as a liaison officer for us. And the liaison function goes under that command function as well. And really, we use the liaison function to reach out to large private landowners, small private landowners, local government, and just really anybody that has the potential to be affected by the fire. And they're our conduit between those people and the incident management team. And, because there's so many moving pieces in a team, when a landowner comes in, you really want to have a place for them to go, and that's where that liaison function really works well. And generally, on most incident management teams, those liaison officers have done a lot of homework ahead of time, and they're reaching out to people ahead of time as well. But we inevitably are going to miss somebody. And so when somebody walks through the door, we always connect them up with the liaison officer, and then that's kind of their focal point for the rest of the incident, is to work with the liaison officer. But so Gary was working with me this summer, and he said, you guys did a pretty good job of reaching out to the people that were affected by the fire. Can you share that with the Society of American Foresters and the Stewardship Group and the forest landowners, and let them know how you guys do that? And really, I guess part of it with incident management teams is that, like any kind of team, whether they're the Oakland Raiders or Northern Rockies Team 7, they all have a personality. And they generally have a personality that's kind of similar to their leader. And I'm kind of a laid-back person. Dwayne can attest to this. And I'm also a very customer service-oriented person. Up until last year, I spent 15 years on a school board, so I'm used to kind of being in controversial situations and stuff like that. And so being in incident management is no big deal. But what I learned from the school board and what I've learned from incident management is that none of us have all the answers. None of us have all the information. And so you want to go to the people that have the information to help you get those good answers. And unless we're fighting a fire outside of Deer Lodge where I live and it's on our family property there, I'm probably going to not know the ins and outs of your guys' turf. And so we're going to lean on private landowners very heavily for intelligence, so that they can help us be successful out there in managing that incident. Because ultimately, I would say that 90% of the landowners that I've talked to don't want fire on their property on a hot August afternoon. They want it to be more in the setting that Julia just showed, when it's at the right time and the fire effects are going to be a net positive as opposed to a net negative. And so we've really learned over the years that landowners will work with us. I see John over there, and you worked with us great last summer, and I mean, there's a guy over there that saved our bacon because he had done a whole bunch of forestry work on the Sterling Ranch, and we were trying to keep fire off the Sterling Ranch and do some different things. Well, he knew the network of roads that he had built and all the things. And so when we get those connections built and we can find the right person to find us the answers, it works out really well. I was working for Jen in 2017, and sometimes on your incident management team, the bulk of the team is people you've assembled the team yourself, but in busy fire seasons, you have to go out and grab firefighters from wherever. And periodically, you grab folks that don't necessarily work the same way as your team does. And I had a division supervisor that came in and he pushed some line on private land where he really didn't need to be pushing fire line. And luckily, my operations people got it stopped in time, but those landowners were not happy with me. And they were not happy with our team. And we were hosting meetings in their driveway of the ranch because they were kind of the community center for this little area in the south end of Rock Creek. And I remember after our first meeting there, Mrs. Clark goes like this, and it's like, it's time. And we go into the kitchen, and I just let her yell at me because that's what she needed to do. And I've learned this from the school board, and this is my hot tip of the day, is that when people are mad, just let them barf words over you for like 15 minutes, and they usually solve their own problem. And we really didn't solve Mrs. Clark's problem, but she actually helped me solve my problem. And, part of it was I took ownership for the decision that was made out there. That's my job as the incident commander, is every decision that's made by the team is my decision. Whether I made it or not, I own them all. And said, hey, we made a mistake here. We want to make this better. But then in the same vein, I turned to the table and I said, but I need your help. And I said, you guys know this hillside behind your house, better than anybody else out here on the fire ground. And we need to know where to put a line in so that we don't affect you anymore. And as soon as I said that, Mr. Clark got up from the table. No, he didn't go get a rifle. He went and got this 4-foot by 4-foot aerial photo of the ranch. And we just started looking, and we solved the problem together. And so to me, in incident management, when working with private landowners, that's really the key, at least in my mind, is let's work together to figure this out, because I don't have the answers. I'm going to bring in an organization that's going to provide this level of support for you, but you guys know your land better than anything. You know where that secret road is that nobody knows about, or that other trail that we don't know about. You know about the cabin that's not in Montana cadastral as well, that nobody knows about because it's not on the tax rolls. And we're not going to tell the revenue people after the fact. We just want to know that there's a structure out there. I got some neighbors like that. Anyways, those are the key things that we really look for. And I would say that over the time that I've been in incident management, we more and more have gravitated away from single jurisdiction fires and are mostly on multiple jurisdiction fires. And that, the white land on the map is the jurisdiction that we know the least about, but you know the most about. And so that's why we have to come to you for that kind of help. And I don't know, our success is based on your guys' success as well. It's a mutual thing there for sure. The other thing that's happened, I would say in the last decade, is our work with industrial landowners has really changed as well. I've had nothing but great success working with them, and they know to come to the table early. They know who to talk to in the team, and they may be taking their own actions out there on the ground. And from John Thompson's standpoint, I don't have a problem with that. The only thing we'd like to know is where you're working, what you're doing, if there's a way we can tie our operation in with your operation. And then the other thing that I've done with private landowners that want to take their own action that's worked really well is that, we take risk management and safety very seriously. We don't want anybody to get hurt. And so if there's a way that we can make their operations safer by providing them with communication back to our organization and things like that, we're going to do that. And it's real simple gestures that go a long way to make the operation really successful. And so that's kind of the approach I've been taking. I was hoping today we could make this conversational so that you don't have to sit here and listen to me the whole day. And I bet Brent doesn't want to talk the whole day as well. So I don't know if you guys want to know more about how we're structured or not, or if most folks understand the structure, but basically we're bringing in an organization and, we got a planning function that develops all the plans that we operate on. They develop the intelligence, the maps and things like that we're working with. Again, the planning function might be reaching out to private landowners as well to help make those maps more accurate and things like that. Our operations function, that's the nuts and bolts of the organization. That's where the firefighters and the tool swingers on the ground, they fit under that. And then the aviation side of our operation also fits in there. The logistics, that's the support organization that provides everything for everybody else. And, they're the key to everything we do. If you ever outrun your logistics, you're not going to be successful. And so they make sure everybody has a place to sleep, gets fed, has communication, has transportation, things like that. You have to have a financial function. Somebody's paying the bill. Somebody's making sure people get paid. Somebody's dealing with claims, those kind of things. And then the command function, that's where I sit. And, underneath the command function is our liaison officers, our safety officers, and our public information officers. And, one of the other pieces with private landowners that I found is critical is to talk to them about how they want to be communicated with. Because if we just go forward with the type of communication we're used to, we're going to miss somebody. And so it's important for us to figure out how people want to be communicated with. Some people might want a text message. Somebody might want all the communication to come through the sheriff's office. They may want it through Facebook. We learned last year in Cascade that you go to the town clerk because she makes contact with everybody. And it was great. It was perfect. One-stop shop and nice lady. Just don't cross her. But if you're pay your water bill in Cascade. But, those kind of things. But so communication is a big piece too. And I got in trouble. I used to say for years, there's no secrets. And I was told by somebody, never say there's no secrets because that implies you're hiding something. And so I think the secret then is to just over communicate and just tell everybody what's going on. And I think that really leads to a lot of success. Brent, I didn't know if you had any more to add. I've been talking a long time here.
Can everybody hear me if I don't? So we're not switching this mic back and forth all the time. Just a couple things to hit on that he did. Our system in Lewis and Clark County is called a RAVE system, and it's an amazing system. It's the reverse 911 is what he's saying. We call it the RAVE system, and it can really get out and touch a bunch of people that if we were driving there and trying to get a hold of you which we will, but ahead of time, if they're able to call you and get a hold of you, text you, however it is that you're signed up for it, that saves a lot of time for you, and it saves a lot of time for us. We're still going to physically go there, but that system will help out a ton, and it can target a certain area however big we want it to be. All we have to do is make that happen in the computer. And it will even get our system, if it's a big enough event and it's happening so fast, we can even go to where people are driving through on the highway, and it'll hit their cell phone as they're going through that area. So it definitely helps a lot, but you do have to be signed up for it. And we can certainly tell you how to do that. It's on the Sheriff's Office website. It'll tell you exactly how to get signed up. It's also on the 911 website. I think it's every website you could possibly think of, it's on there, and there's a way, directions on how you can get signed up for that. The other part of the thing that you were saying is we do all of that right at the beginning in the first few hours of that, so we're running around, hopefully not literally with our hair on fire if we have hair, but we're doing all that, so when these management teams come in, we love them because they come in with all kinds of resources that everybody can use. So we're thankful for all of that and the partnerships that we have with you guys, for sure. So we can take questions, or unless you have
one other little law enforcement thing real quick, and then we'll get to Rocky. last summer we ran into an issue, and we've ran into this before, but last summer it's prevalent in my mind because my long-term memory seems to be disappearing. But I think my brain's getting full or something. But we ran into a landowner that was going to refuse to let firefighters on his land to take suppression action. And while that was fine for him, it wasn't good for his neighbors because the fire was going to leave his property and go right onto the neighbor's property. And so if, you always want to fight fire in the best spot. And the best spot, there was a lot of good stuff on his land where we could take a good stand. And so, we were hoping they would come around, and eventually he did. But just so you know, in Montana, there is Montana code that allows you to fight fire on private property if you're, in the firefighting business. And so the sheriff reminded this individual of that, and it resolved the situation. But that's another thing periodically you run into is that people don't want firefighter actions to take place on their property. And it's very interesting depending on where you are in Montana. In western Montana, we're concerned about our trees. If you're in eastern Montana, they're more concerned about forage. And so, and a lot of times with that forage, the easiest way to fight fire is to go to the nearest road and eliminate the forage by using fire. And I think anymore, most incident management teams are very aware of that and very cognizant of that and realize that I have the potential to eliminate somebody's economic livelihood very quickly here if we take an action using fire. And so we're going to try not to take that action, but sometimes that's the only action we can take as well. So, Rocky, you had a question back there, a comment.
For Brent,
Yep.
Could you touch briefly on people that choose not to evacuate and their movements?
Oh, yeah. Thank you for that, Rocky. Yeah, so it is totally up to you whether you want to evacuate, being over 18 and not being intoxicated or whatever. It is your right to stay on your property. That doesn't mean that's like Sheriff Dutton says, that's going to be your little postage stamp during this whole time. Because although you want to be good neighbors and go check on your neighbor's property, you can't do that. You need to stay on you chose to stay, you need to stay on your property. And the other side of that is if you decide to stay, that doesn't mean that you get to go into town for breakfast the next morning and then go back. Because if you leave, we're not letting you back. But that's a lot of people don't realize that is something that can happen. They think they want to still, there's a significant thing happening there and you still want to live your life, which we want you to. But in that situation, if you didn't evacuate, you need to stay on your property. Because we are going to have rovers as law enforcement, we call them rovers, that are roving around in the evacuated area to make sure that your property and your things are safe. And like I said before, you have people who want to take advantage of that. But we're patrolling the area and making sure that that's not going to happen. And we don't know if you're a neighbor with him, and we're going to take care of that situation, how we take care of that situation, because we're going to protect his property, same as anybody in there. Did that answer your question, Rocky? Is that what you wanted in? Okay.
I have a question for John. A couple of years ago, and I know it's happened before, and wasn't any of the Montana teams that I'm aware of, but burnout operations taking place without being an emergency situation on private lands without the owner's consent or without the owner's knowledge. And that has caused some real issues. And your thoughts on that?
Alan's looking at me because we just talked about this on Tuesday at the incident management team meetings. It's a slippery slope. And as an incident commander, I think we've learned over the years that while fire is an excellent tool to suppress fire, to remove that, we have to be way more diligent in the application of it. And so I guess the tasking that I give to my operations people is that I want that communication with me as the incident commander, that we're applying fire on the ground. We're also going to communicate with the folks that we're working for as well, that we're using fire. Now, there may be some small scale stuff going on, and I want to differentiate the difference between the use of fire by our incident management team versus the use of fire during an initial attack. Because a lot of times if fire is being utilized during an initial attack, it's probably the most relevant tactic at that time that they need to use because of the way the fire is moving. But normally when an incident management team is in place, we've had more time to plan our actions. And every now and then you're going to have a piece of the fire that's kind of dictating what you do, but a lot of the times you have time to take action out there. And I guess I think I feel like I'm skirting the question here because it's a slippery question. But I mean, in a perfect world, we would be in contact with everybody before we put fire on the ground on their property. Whether we do that or not, I can't 100% guarantee. And I know that we have some case law where we haven't done that very well. So, yeah. I don't think I answered your question very well. I think I just skirted it because it's not an easy one.
I just know, like on the Olo complex, that there was elaborate measures taken to get permission, and sometimes you didn't get permission, and I understand that. But in emergency situations, you obviously are not going to know where all the property lines are, nor are you going to be able to contact those owners.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, and I'm going to go a little bit to, one of the challenges you have with firefighting is that, we play a game of chance in terms of what's going to happen with the continuation of the weather that we're under. And so you're always trying to base your actions on what's expected out there or what you've seen happen already. And so a lot of times when these large scale, and I will use Lolo as an example, that fire had made some humongous runs and made some big pushes. And I think the actions they took were justified at the time based on what they'd seen ahead of time. And unfortunately, what we've learned over time is that sometimes the best place to take action is on private land. And I think, but that's where this whole communication piece that I've been talking about is that if you've got that relationship built ahead of time, I think those actions are going to be way easier to take. And on the back end, everything's going to be okay. Alan, you were going to say something related to that.
If it's okay, I'll weigh in.
Do you want the mic?
I don't think I need the mic.
Okay.
But it's a really good point, and Chippy Creek in, 2007 was a good example of a team from out of the area initiating a burnout operation quarter to a half mile away from the fire, and it basically was extinguished because it never got to the fire, and so those things are the, the things that really trigger, our response. The other thing from a Montana Forest Owners Association, see, I've got one foot in both worlds, right? I used to be an IC, I'm still a deputy IC, but I'm over here at the Montana Forest Owners Association, very concerned about private property rights. And when a landowner has his timber burnt up, through suppression actions that are the best location, the best tactic, if it's merchantable saw timber, then you got a capital loss. Okay, fine, you can, pencil that out. If it's seedlings, saplings, or immature pole timber, you got squat, and you've just lost 30, 40 years of your investment in time, money, and energy in growing that crop. You know, and Peter Cole has had a lot of input from private landowners that have suffered, you know, burnout operations from suppression, you know, operations on their private land, you know, and they're left holding the bill. And it's the right thing to do. The tactics, the strategy are the right thing to do. We can't afford to compromise our ability as wildland fire, you know, agencies in entering private land and taking the appropriate suppression activity. But at the same time, we need to be sensitive to the landowners, you know, and engage them and say, well, how can we best do that here? Now, in an emergency situation, you can't do that every time.
Right.
You know, but where you have time and opportunity, not only do you have to engage them, you know, you need to inform them directly, not just through news releases, you know, or public service announcements, but then also from an incident management team better be documenting that stuff. Because when claims come back or lawsuits, you know, for violating your discretionary function, right? Whatever. You need to be able to demonstrate how you communicated your intent, how you coordinated with the landowner, you know, and what the outcome was and what you did, because you will wind up in court.
Yeah, and it's interesting on the documentation side. I told that story about Mrs. Clark and sitting in her kitchen. Well, the next winter, they were putting in for some emergency funding from FSA for the loss of grazing on their property, and I had the best documentation. And they came to me, and I provided the best documentation for them to get a grant through FSA to cover their losses associated with grazing, because I was the one that said, you need to move the cattle now, all these things. And so the documentation works out really well on both sides of the equation for sure. So, John, you had a question?
Yeah, so Brent, this one for you. So, sure. Well, we'll just grab the local farm, or both of them. So, I do a lot of work for private landowners up there. And so, as rapidly as the first one, 6-7 years ago, came down, you know, Monday morning and came flying down Lolo Creek there. Trying to get back up to 3 of my different, the OZ range, you know, the little white schoolhouse up Lolo Creek there, the big ranch right there. Then I was trying to get back up there to help assist. So trying to get back in there and not being an owner, but a representative of a client or a ranch, what would you suggest, or what is the protocol with it? So when you pull up and you say, yeah, I'm jumping up, and they're like, yeah, you're John Doe, you're probably going to go steal something. What protocol? We have landowners here, we have land managers here, they have, you know, ranch managers, they have ranch hands, and all of a sudden they're in town. They're going to town because the fire's coming, now they can't get back in. So what's the protocol?
So, again, like I said, it was trying to be standard over the state, which it is not. It's trying to be that way, but I can tell you in Lewis and Clark County, a lot of our, say our resident deputies know who ranch managers are at this particular, you're not the owner, but they know people. So it's relationships that help out a lot. It's also the sheriff and his crew of our crew of taking the time to go, okay, I understand that you're going to help. Because we have that at the beginning of every fire. You've got people wanting to go in there and help bring out horses and do all this kind of stuff. If there's time in between while we're doing the evacuations, that landowner or that person that's in there is going to say, I'm going to have some people coming to help me.
So it would be very wise when this thing gets cranked up that the actual owner provides a list of who's coming in and out to move horses, cattle, different things.
That would be,
So that,
yeah.
you know, I don't think that probably does not go on, because you don't think about it until the day the fire's in your backyard.
Exactly. It's all education. It's all that. And if that can happen, that would help out a ton. It really would. But as you say, not everybody's going to do that. But we can take it like a case by case basis, and that's what we do now. Is
And that's pretty much what they did. But I'm going to encourage my clients to,
Yeah.
provide a list, the Rocky, who is on it.
Well,
Rocktail Ranch, who's on the Sterling Ranch, who's on the Woods Ranch, who all the players, you don't know. Because it rotates pretty hard, the ranch all.
the other thing you could do too, John, is that, you know who your clients are, you know where they're based. Maybe one day when you're driving home, you swing by the local Forest Service or DNRC office, look up the local fire person, because they're probably going to be on point out there as well. And if you show up in your truck and they're going to say, this is the guy we need, because he knows that secret squirrel route back in there. And so,
Yeah, Stickney Creek and all that.
Yeah.
It's like a miniature Grand Canyon, man.
Yeah.
They looked over from Stevens and went, oh,
so.
I wanted it to burn because it's nothing but snakes and spiders and I hate it.
So our guys, our substation deputies that we have, that's part of their job, is to go around and know, okay, this ranch or this property owner, that's their job. Go have coffee, learn who these people are. So
When I got the call from Gary, and Gary's position on the Harris Fire, being the liaison between, DNRC, but yet he was ahead of all of you guys contacting all the ranches. That's, out of all the years I've been around all this, this one ran really, really smooth, I thought. I was on the north end of the fire, so I don't, we're the push to Great Falls or Danes or whoever,
Yeah.
but it, that I thought really worked well. And it's just having that person, that's all he does is get the cadastral or the Garmin and Onyx and.
well, in a lot of teams, what they've done is, we mobilize with a liaison officer, but if there's an opportunity to get some kind of local liaison officer, it also pays off in spades as well, because those local people have that relationship as well.
where we really run into the problem is not the big ranches and not the big landowners. It's the little ones that have everybody that they've ever known trying to come help them move their refrigerator out or their, whatever else it is. So.
Well, just curious with all the fires and stuff like that, how much theft really goes on? Is there really that? I swear I've never seen anything in the paper all of a sudden, 2 months after a fire where somebody says, we evacuated, we came back and our house was ripped off. Is it 1%?
I guess I can't really give you a percentage on that. I know when all these fires first started, that was a big thing. But I think us patrolling and doing that in there and trying to keep that at bay has done that. So I can't really give you a percentage.
You always think at some point you're going to read an article about
Sure.
somebody with a full truck was out of the house for 2 months and came back.
But it definitely did happen a few, over past years. So.
Yeah, I don't doubt it didn't happen, but I don't think it's a real common, just due to the protocol.
Right.
Lock, control, things like that.
They do help. There's a question back there.
Yeah, one for John. I know that, as an incident commander and, landowners in the heat of the battle when their property's threatened, they're looking to the team to put the fire out, obviously. But could you share what it's like, in terms of a bad fire year and what you go through in getting resources and how, say, for example, in the state, there might be multiple large fires and you may not get everything you need, and just how that system works, because I think some landowners don't understand that you don't have at your full disposal.
Right.
You don't get everything you want all the time. Could you just talk about
Yeah.
that?
So, every fire is local, is what they say. So every fire is local somewhere, and so, usually you tap out all your local resources, and then you reach out to your neighbors, to get their resources. And then when your neighbors don't have any resources, then you move it up to what we refer to as the geographic area. And our geographic area is based out of Missoula, called Northern Rockies. And we reach out to them, and then they push it out to everybody and say, John Thompson needs this thing at this location on this day. Can you get it for him? And so they push it out to all their centers that are under their umbrella, and at the same time, they push it up to our national coordination center in Boise, Idaho, and they push it out as well. And so essentially in the wildland fire community, most of the resources are pooled nationally. While they are located geographically and located locally, we're under a national system, and it allows us to move resources around as fire seasons occur. I mean, right now we're moving all kinds of stuff down to the southwest to help out Arizona and New Mexico, because that's where the fires are, and they'll come return the favor in July and August when they're under the monsoons. And so that's kind of the system we work under. But under that system, there's a finite number of resources. We only have so many hand crews, we only have so many helicopters, we only have so many air tankers and so many fire engines. And based upon what's going on in the geographic area, your fire may or may not get the stuff you need. And I always say this to people is that the fire I am on is the most important fire there is, because I'm on it. It's my fire, and it's the most important fire. But that's not the way the coordination center sees it. They think that Allen's fire is the most important fire. And so then, he's going to get the stuff and I'm not, or maybe vice versa. Our fire will become more important. But it's also, there's a lot of ownership and pressure on the team to tell the story of the fire correctly. And so on a daily basis, we basically tell a story about what is threatened by our fire, how much is burned, what fire behavior is like, who's threatened, all these kind of things. And then they take all that information and they prioritize the fires in the geographic area. Then the national coordination group they prioritize on a nationwide basis whose fires are most important geographically, and that's how they move resources around. But even if I'm the most important fire in the geographic area, there's still a finite number of resources, and I may or may not get what we need. So that's kind of the simplistic way the system works. And I saw a question here, a question there, and a question back there. So are we up against time, Dwayne, or we got? Well, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Pertaining to the Ross order, concerning the resources, has there been any efficiency? Because I know last year, teams were just holding resources when the fires were out.
Well, that's a tough one. There's some reasons why the incident management teams will hold on to resources. One is that there may be something that's being anticipated in the local area, and the team can provide the support for those resources. And so once you let a resource go, you may never get it back. And so I'll tell you this much, as an incident commander, the best incident for me to manage is the one where it's just me and my team and nobody else. Because believe it or not, we're all humans, and humans do things that they're not supposed to do sometimes. And so when you don't have people on your fire, it's better, because that's fewer humans to manage. You deal with humans every day. That's true. And see their and so but that's really why resources are normally hoarded, if they are hoarded on a large incident. I think in the last couple of years, because of the shortages we've experienced, that we complete the mission generally and we get the resources out of there. But every now and then we're going to have resources that need to stay until the local unit is comfortable taking back that fire to manage it with their own resources. So that's another thing we're up against too, yeah.
And teams are doing a lot better job of sharing scarce resources, so that they can support multiple incidents.
Yeah, I know July happens and it becomes just a cluster.
Well, the ICs are on a conference call every day,
Yeah.
and they're figuring out, can we loan you a helicopter for a fuel cycle?
Yeah.
Or for half a shift or something like that, or a hot shot crew for 2 days.
Yeah. And I don't think I've ever been on an incident where there hasn't been some level of disorganization at some point in time. Because that's part of our mantra that we always say as incident management teams is that we bring order to chaos. But it takes a little bit of time to get that order there. And so that's always a challenge we have. And I remember when I became an operations section chief, I told the division supervisors that I'd worked with for years, and I said, I'm not going to do what those other ops chiefs did. And the very first time I went out, I did exactly what all those other ops chiefs did. And we had like all this stuff, and we didn't know what to do with it. It was just, and a lot of times we end up with stuff that is ordered on the initial attack. Because when fires take off, they sometimes can appear to be bigger than they are. And so you order all this stuff, and all this stuff shows up, and then you got to manage it until you can get rid of it. And so you had a question.
Yeah, so I was a little bit more curious about some of the suppression decision-making, and if you've seen changes over time as we're trying to get more fire on the landscape, but then also it's more in the media and people are more afraid of it, so.
I would say yes, that we have seen a change. And I think that, and this, again, John Thompson's perspective, I think we're actually doing a smarter job out there. And part of that, in my mind, is driven by the resource scarcity. Because a good friend of mine, he's a member of my team, he's a fire behavior guy, and he has this saying that he goes, every fire will find its footprint. Every fire will find its edge. Well, sometimes that edge isn't where we want it to be, and that's why we're fighting it. But a lot of times it'll find an edge right where we want it to be, and then we won't do anything because we realize that edge probably isn't going to do anything anyways. There's no fuels, there's been a big slope change, something happened. And so I think over the course of time, and just because we've seen a reduction in the amount of resources we can have, what is it, Alan? I think in probably 2010, we could reach out and grab 450 agency-sponsored hand crews, and I don't even think there's 200 of them right now. And there's 20 people on every hand crew, so our numbers have shrunk. We're utilizing more private enterprise folks, private engines and things like that, but they're at the same thing. Some of them, the private engine is their hobby and they have a day job doing something else. And so if they're available to take the truck out, they'll take it out. So I think that leads a little bit to it.
We have time for one more question.
Yeah.
So, as a field rep, because I'm forester for Solomon, as a field rep in the woods, I just kind of want to go through a scenario where if we were to pop a fire, I'm outside of, I'm a firefighter in Park County, but I don't have the dispatch channel in my radio for whatever local region I'm in. For one, would it be ideal for me to come over gold if I don't have cell phone service?
Can you repeat that, please?
So if you don't have cell service, but you can get radio transmission, which channel should you use?
Right.
I don't know, maybe you have a better answer for that one, Rocky.
Most color channels are line of sight.
Okay.
So it depends on your topographies and stuff. If you have repeaters, I guess it depends on what your commonalities are and who you're trying to contact.
Yeah, I understand that they're lines. I guess because I'm trying to come up with a way, and also maybe just a list real quick of what pertinent information I want to give over the radio. 'Cause
right.
Like you're on the phone and able to really talk. You got a short period of time to get information out. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you can hit somebody on a color channel, do it. A lot of them use red.
as well. I mean, so use a color channel and provide the pertinent information, and really, you know, they're looking at what's the fire burning in, what's the weather like, what values are nearby, if you know any hazards.
Seat size.
Yes, just a general size, a scene size up is really what they're looking for.
So
Yeah.
one of the things for the radio system is a lot of the state of Montana is going to the trunked radio system, and when you have a big fire like this, there'll be an incident channel for whatever fire that's going to be. No, I'm imagining you're in Park, so you're going to be out there. I know they have incident channels too. So you could get on that incident channel and find out where fire is, what channel fire is talking on, that kind of thing. So it would probably, the easier ones in bigger fires would be like an incident 4 or 5, because that's going to be a statewide one.
Okay, so one thing I didn't hear John say today, and it's key to the success of an incident team or the success of a county sheriff, and it's called relationships. And John talks about it a lot with the team, and I know it's important to make things work. So I want to thank John and Brett for being here. A great discussion. Thank you guys.